Welcome to Homes Room. Just like homeroom, we start off our day getting together with our homies, swapping stories, even a little kiss and tell action. This podcast contains language not suitable for younger listeners, topics about sex and mental health. Discretion is advised. Our views are our own. Let class begin.
Welcome back to another episode of Homes Room. Today I have two proven Homes Room boss babes, Leah Piper and Dr. Willow Brown. Welcome back to the both of you.
Thanks. It's so fun to be back here again.
We haven't had anyone back so quickly, with the exception of my co-host Kaitlin, who she did an interview, and then a few weeks later I was like, hey, do you want to come back on? Because that was really fun. So thank you for jumping back on so quick, and I'm excited that you're part of our Boss Babe series.
Well, we do our best to be babes in the boss realm, and sometimes it feels like an absolute win and we're on top of the world, and other times, just like everyone else, we feel like we're really not getting very far very fast. So just so y'all know, it's everyone goes through the ups and downs of trial and error through the journey to success.
Yeah. So having you back on, the Boss Babe series is about women supporting women. I love that somehow my podcast ended up being supported by women more than anything else, and it's 63% margin on average. That to me is pretty awesome, but also that means that I'm ironically enough, on YouTube, which we just started doing, it's the favored towards men, which is maybe men are more visual and that. I don't know, but I think that being able to do something like this and have people on that are outright supportive in general, but are women who are linked together, being strong and showing each other the grace, and we called it girl gang at one point in time, I think, and I love seeing that with you two. Is it came through so well in our last podcast interview, where you guys just are so supportive of each other and so down for each other, and I love it. It's beautiful to see.
Yeah, we love each other. We want to see each other succeed.
Yeah,
we do what we can.
I think it's interesting. Our industry is an interesting, realm. When we look at our podcast, we actually have a pretty good balance of male and female listeners at the Sex Reimagined podcast. But when we look at industry folks, who we often have guests on the show, it's pretty female dominant. I actually am oftentimes scrambling around looking for more men to contribute to the conversation in the realm of sexuality and research and all those things, sex.
Yeah. Do you find that, for me, I think as a male podcaster, it's harder for me to get the female response to questions like that. I get probably more female response, but it's still not overwhelming when it comes to asking questions or getting people to engage in the conversation. Do you find that it's maybe skewed that way do you think it's maybe skewed that way because they feel more comfortable instantly having that conversation? Or
no, actually, for our show we get more male engagement, asking questions, DMing us, and posting on YouTube in the comments than we do women.
Interesting.
Very interesting. Yes.
Yeah.
But women do love to talk about sex. When we're with women, that she can't get them to shut up. Our clients, our female clients, especially, our male. I feel like my male clients are more just okay, whatever she wants, whatever she says.
Oh, really? Well, I think in a lot of ways, our women listeners are more comfortable listening to women talk about sex than they would be listening to men talk about sex.
Yeah,
I guess it depends on the voice behind it too, right?
Yeah.
So, with that, it's always awesome to have a female perspective, and that's one of the reasons why I was super pumped about the concept of my podcast and adamant about having a female co-host, because in the end, my opinion as a male is like one-sided. No matter how I slice it, no matter how educated I try and make myself on the topic, it's still only going to come from that perspective. So like having Kaitlin around makes it super amazing to have like that kind of challenge. I previewed an episode for a friend, and her response was, I think you two both just have very strong personalities, and you have a good way of, you know, being soft with each other while also standing your ground. And I think that that also is something that, you know, for listening to Sex Reimagined, maybe people learn how to, you know, tiptoe around those boundaries a little bit less and stand up to those boundaries a little bit more.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some truth to that. And welcome, Kaitlin. Glad you made
Hi.
it. Speaking of your co-host there.
Apologies. Yeah, I have sick children and all kinds of craziness happening over
Oh,
here in St.
and you're
Louis.
You're still making it. You're still rock,
Better late than not at all, homies. Sorry
Still-
so much.
still being a boss babe through it all.
We're trying so hard. But I know I just jumped in, but I just want to also say that females hearing other females talk about sex is also so empowering for women in general, just because there is such this stigma of like, I grew up in the Bible Belt, and purity culture is just like such a huge thing where like your character and your integrity is based on the idea of you being able to be this pure creature and saving yourself for marriage and, you know, dressing modestly. Like I was in high school, and modest is hottest was like this huge catchphrase that was
wow.
going around.
Interesting. Yeah. We didn't have that in Southern California.
I'm very jealous because here in Missouri, it was rampant.
Oh,
Yeah.
But it is so empowering, especially for women who totally grew up in completely different cultures. I hope that these are types of topics of conversation that my child, you know, grows up hearing and having open conversations with her peers and people that she loves and trusts. And I want to thank you as a mother for your podcast adventure and putting yourself out there in this way, regardless as to whether you've gotten 100% positive feedback or not. I just really appreciate it. And I think it's really empowering what you do.
I love what you're saying, Kaitlin. I mean, imagine the youth today. Like, imagine the young girls, 13, 14, 15, being like, did you know you have vestibular bulbs? Did you know that those plump up and juice up? And that's what actually, you know, lets your body know you're turned on.
I'm glad you said that. I have a question about that because I just listened to that episode where that was the thing. And there was a reference to describing it like a paper towel roll. And I love that.
Go,
I
Leah.
love that.
Leah,
I loved
jump
it.
in on that.
Yeah, Sherry Winston was talking about the urethral sponge, which is actually like the female G-spot, and how when you're visually watching the engorgement of a vulva, you can really think about that part of the anatomy really does look like and feels like a paper towel roll. It's quite fascinating when we start to open up the conversation about erectile tissue for women, because women have as much erectile tissue inch for inch and ounce for ounce as men, and none of us were raised knowing that. So I just think that's a giant perspective shift.
Yeah.
And the baby in the background thinks so too.
Yes, yes, mommy.
Yeah.
I get it. Sometimes I want my mommy too.
Exactly.
I feel you, kid.
So in that same episode, you as that was like the subject of topic, right, I think it was right before it, vaginal plasties, I think is what it's called, and like it's been kind of super popular over the last like 15 to 20 years, which I didn't know it had been around that long. But also,
Right.
I think I put this up as, I think, a poll on my personal Instagram, possibly, I don't remember, but it's forever ago. And you know what, I guess, I don't want to say advice, but you know, how do you two tackle that topic when it gets brought up?
Gosh, it doesn't really get brought up a
Not
lot.
very
I think we
much.
had talked
Really?
about it with Sherry on that one interview. you know, it's surgery on your vulva, and you know, women are getting surgery on all different parts of their bodies to feel more confident, to feel better, and you have to weigh it out individual to individual, like, you know, is that worth it for you to have, you know, less sensitivity, let's say, for your nipples, if that, you know, if you have a breast enhancement, or is it worth it to you to have potentially less sensitivity to the vulva with a vaginoplasty? I personally don't know why, like, very few people are looking at your vagina, or maybe not, maybe depending on who you are, a lot of people are looking at it and you want it to look a certain way. But I think that, you know, every vulva is so different. It's like a snowflake. Every single one is different. Every single one is beautiful. And we actually did do some interviews with some women who are now like reading the vulva, like almost like a tarot reading, like really looking at the curve of the lips, and like seeing elephant trunks and calling in the ancient of the divine feminine through that. It's really quite interesting what, you know, when we really start to go a little bit deeper into the vulva and actually into the vagina and connect with that part of a woman's anatomy, there are stories beyond stories beyond stories that can come out of that part of a woman's body that she could never think of with her mind.
Yeah,
so
the vulva oracle. It's kind of a
go.
pretty cool concept of taking a look and seeing the images, seeing the archetypical images that can come from beautifying, and seeing the vulva as something that's really sacred, and that you can kind of get these mystical messages through this type of oracle reading concept. And it's pretty neat with these ladies, Sierra and Avina. Julia Avina. I'll get you in the show notes. I'll get you the episode number for that. It's pretty interesting if your listeners are curious about it, because I think what's important is that as a culture, and regardless if you're very much like committed to purity culture, for instance, or if you're committed to, you know, being slut positive, like whatever your journey is, right? Whatever your political views or your religious views are around sexuality, the idea is that we can normalize the conversation.
Yeah.
You know, and that we can actually talk about how to have great sex lives with all of our values intact. My values might be different from someone else's values, but at the end of the day, don't we all want to have a really fulfilling life? That is filled with like richness and depth and meaning and purpose, and hopefully pleasure is included in all of that.
Yeah.
And so I think whether you come from a very conservative religious background, I hope some of our message can leak into those communities so that people become comfortable talking about having a really beautiful love life, and that includes sexual pleasure.
Yeah. And everyone's on such a unique and personal journey with that. I mean, I think that's one of the things that we really put forward with Sex Reimagined is there's no judgment. It's all really like what makes you feel alive? Like what turns you on? Where does your arousal live? You know, and people will come to us, particularly women, and be like, I have no libido. I don't know where my arousal lives, you know, and it's sort of our job to help them discover where it might be. It could be in their pinky toe, you know, it could be in their clitoral head. It could be in their nipples. It could be behind the ears. So it's like, or it could be in their brain. It could be covered up with psychological beliefs that are holding them back from actually just letting go into arousal and pleasure. So, you know, Leah and I both really are big advocates for people finding what's right for them. And I think people are afraid to look a lot of the time.
Well, that's a great segue, because like going back to the vaginal
vaginoplasty.
Yeah. You know, no judgment. Whatever you want to do so that you feel confident with your body, like I think you should do it. And of course my heart's desire, right? Like my heart's desire was that you could just see the perfection of your body and not feel insecure about it, and see its wonder and see it through other people's eyes, which hopefully validates your beauty and your exquisiteness, and that you wouldn't feel like you have to compare yourself to the naked images, the vulvas that you see in magazines or on porn. I mean, because I don't want anyone to feel like they're not enough, or that they're not beautiful, or they're not worthy, or that there's something wrong with their body. But the truth is, we live in a culture where that is rampant. I mean, I've had surgeries, I've had plastic surgery, I've cut my stomach so I could stop eating so much. I've taken weight loss shots. Like, I am also the person out there who's done drastic things because she wants to feel confident and look beautiful with her clothes off. So much so that she's now created tons of new scars that are quite unsightly. But I've never felt so comfortable with my clothes off in my life. So, I mean, it's this totally weird, batshit crazy pursuit of wanting to be desirable. And that's okay. Like, whatever path we have to travel down, it's my path to travel down that path. And it's really no one else's business or opinions about my body or my journey. I'm going to take the risks that feel right and that give me peace. Yeah. And we just got to support that with our brethren.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I agree. I'm going to pitch it to Kaitlin, but I just want to shout out the pillows, Leah, behind you.
The vulva puppets.
I didn't notice them at first, but I was
Leah
like,
doesn't go anywhere without her vulva puppets.
I love them.
2, 1 for each breast.
And 2 different sizes, because we celebrate we're not symmetrical.
But
love it.
I've seen those more and more, and like people using them, especially on podcasts or like informational things. And I think it adds a little bit of like silliness to the situation. So like maybe it'll loosen you up a little bit to see this thing. Like my favorite, it's got like I don't want to say animated, but like instead of like a medical version of a clitoris, like all of the pieces, all of like the legs, everything, it's like different colored, and it looks like I don't know, a Muppet, I guess. But it's just so funny because you can put your hand slightly in it to move the pieces as you're talking.
Oh, cool.
And I was like, that is the coolest thing ever. But of course I'm sure they got it custom made somewhere, because I've never seen another one like it. Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, you can buy them, but they're pricey. We have little clitoral like models. 3D printed models, so we just hold them up next to the.
But yeah, I mean, to your point, we call them like teaching aids, right? Yeah. Like to be able to teach and because if you were just to like throw up a picture of like anatomy, straight up like a model, it tends to make it feel really clinical, which isn't very sexy. And yet you also don't want to diminish it. Like, the vulva puppets are nice because they're made of velvet, and they're pretty, and they're feminine, and there's something that really sort of speaks to sensuality in a way, but without worrying about people being offended or uncomfortable. Because as you can imagine, and as I'm sure you've experienced, man, it's hard to keep people feeling comfortable in the conversation of sex and body parts. I was just on a cruise ship. I was with a friend. She had won this cruise for doing really well at her job, and it happens to be a weight loss community. And a lot of really religious people are part of the organization. Of course, they're asking me what I do, and it was very interesting to sort of explore the language that you communicate with in order to make sure that the conversation of intimacy helps people open when it's so quick for people to close around it. And it was interesting for me to find myself going, "Oop, okay, that was a close. Oop, okay, that was an open. Oop, okay, that was a close." Like, and being really delicate with what I said, how I said it, introducing the podcast that I have with Willow. And so, for years teaching in front of the stage and needing to bring up the anatomy subject, these were really, really helpful. And the other thing that's really helpful is being funny, because people get so intense. We take ourselves so freaking seriously. And we take a look at our sex lives, and we either feel like we're passing or we're failing. And so if you can't lighten the mood and bring a little bit of irreverence to what should be a reverent topic, it really helps people digest the information and feel like they don't have to be so embarrassed by talking about sex. We have so far to go, don't we? I mean, we really have so far to go. When I think about middle America and just going, sometimes Willow and I are spoiled because it's like New York and California, pretty open-minded, pretty easy breezy talking about these kinds of subjects. But it's not like that everywhere. And you
And
really
then
do
Matt
have
and
to be
I are
careful.
smack dab in the middle of the country.
Yeah,
Just
totally.
here.
Well, that's one thing that I didn't grow up here. And
Oh,
that's
no.
the thing that I have to constantly
right.
remind people that I grew up in like Maryland, DC area. So like it's
Okay.
also, so we didn't have those like stigmas in the same way. And like that wasn't a thing. So to me out here, it's always weird to have
Is that right?
to see the closed offness. Cause to me, it's like, oh yeah, I forgot you don't talk about that. Like you
Mhm.
want to keep that like, oh no, that's a conversation you don't have. And to me, it's just like, I don't know, any conversation is like an open conversation. You just have to be willing to talk about it. And
Yeah.
it's such a weird career
Right.
change.
Right.
But Kaitlin, do you have a question that you're ready to throw at these two?
100%. And one thing that of course, this is part of our second annual Boss Babes chunk of interviews, which I'm so
Right.
excited to have you guys on. Thank you so much. Matt and I as co-hosts, we are still always trying to work out the best way to communicate with each other, the best way to schedule interviews with all the craziness and being parents. Was there ever a time where the two of you had to navigate like some struggles of jumping into this adventure together?
Never. Not
Yeah,
once.
right.
It's been
Yeah.
perfect and smooth the whole way through.
Yeah. There's always so many moving parts, right? That's happening into individuals' lives.
Mhm.
And, I mean, we used to live in the same town. We now live 3 hours apart. We've seen each other through total burnout. And thankfully something really unique about the chemistry between Willow and I is we tend to take turns. So when I am no longer a resource and I'm flatlined and I just have to completely unplug, Willow's there with the extra energy to hold the ship. And then when she needs to just unplug, then somehow I tend to be more resourced and I can pick up the ship. So we've been really fortunate that we're not typically both flatlined at the same time. And so we help each other carry the weight, which I feel so grateful. And hopefully that just continues to flow. Because life comes in and shakes shit up, between struggles with finances to heartbreak to big moves to, you name it, we seem to experience it. And we're not unusual, right? I mean, so many people, life is full of crises. And in between is the bliss. And so I think the other thing we're really good at is capitalizing on the bliss. And when one of us feels discouraged, the other one has got the energy to be optimistic. And so we're really good at playing that off of each other.
Yeah. And we run a whole, Sex Reimagined is not just a podcast. It's a company. Like we have courses and classes that we run every month. So, we have a team who supports us and helps us with sales pages and, email campaigns and all that kind of stuff. And so we have a synergy, not just with each other, but also with our team to support us. And so it's really nice because, we might have an idea and then we can take it to someone outside of us as well and be like, is this a good idea or not? And they might have some other idea that we are like, let's not do that. Like we're very good at reading our own nervous systems and reading each other's because of stuff that we're about to teach, which is sort of how people protect themselves. This comes up a lot in sexuality. Sexuality and finances are like kind of the two big trigger places in people's lives, because it's safety. Like, am I safe? Am I protected? Am I in a secure position? No? Okay, well then I'm going to play out this protective mechanism that is my go-to mechanism. So, we're really in touch with what each other's are, and that helps all relationships communicate and improve exponentially. So because we both study it and we both use it within our own work and we both teach it, we are sort of constantly have our finger on the pulse of this deeper layer of what it means to be in relationship with somebody, whether it's an intimate or a business or a friendship or parent-child.
Yeah. And I would also include, we are really supportive of each other's yes and no. Like,
Mm.
I don't want Willow to say yes to something that is going to stress her out and overwhelm her and burden her. I would rather she said no and we re-strategize, and vice versa. I feel so much support for her when I'm like, I'm just in overwhelm. Like, I can't find a big yes for this. Like, I want to say yes, but like my body just feels stressed out at the idea of committing to this. Or this doesn't really feel like the topic that I'm most alive for right now. Like, I just can't get there. And it's not, and I don't feel like I don't have to feel bad. I don't have to feel guilty. I don't worry about her disappointing her. I don't feel like I have to push myself. I know I'm going to be deeply listened to. I think that's a really interesting thing. And I wonder if other businesses that are all men have the same kind of relationship, or if that's a dynamic they have to ever work out. I really feel like with women, we're really good communicators and we listen well. And so, and we're also listening for things that aren't being said. And so it's like, we can also, I call it an attunement. Like, I can feel into how my friend is feeling to help make sure that we're making the best choice together. I can feel the things that she doesn't feel like she can say yet. And we help each other say it, you know, or we get there together. And so I think that's sort of a unique superpower that women have. There's this emotional read that many of us have access to that makes partnership, I think, more harmonic.
Yeah.
And also, here's the other trippy thing. We both have separate businesses from each other. So while we're trying to, like, you know, do the work we do for Sex Reimagined, we're also running our solo businesses. And so we need to also make sure that we're always supporting the other person in her personal goals with her other business, and that we're not in friction with that. We're not in competition with that. We really know that there's enough work for both of us.
Yeah.
Just a couple of boss babes.
Just a couple boss babes being babes. Yeah.
You kind of brought it up in that, Willow, as you were kind of talking, and this is one of the questions that got sent in. And I had to like phrase it because it wasn't necessarily posed as a question. It was just kind of like a general topic. But the question that they were kind of getting to is, how do you reset after feeling like you have low sex drive due to stress? And how do you find like find your sexy in a similar situation? So like, it seemed like they were stressed out and they just weren't feeling themselves and had a low sex drive because of it. And they were trying to figure out how to get back to feeling like they wanted to, but also, you know, feeling like they could be sexy in the same tone.
You know, I think I have women come to me all the time with, I'm like, what's your libido? Scale of 1 to 10. They're like 0.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay,
Right.
it's not impossible. It's impossible to have 0, you know, like if you have breath, you have libido. If you have breath, you have sexual essence. It's just part of being alive. And so what I find is often, if you're at a 0 or a 1 or very low on that scale, you just have a lot of like pressure on you, a lot of I like to call it heavy wet blankets. It's like you're piled up with like 10 heavy wet blankets, and we just need to take one blanket off. Let's just take one off. Let's start there, and then we take another one off, and then we take another. We're 5 blankets off now, and we're like, oh, something's starting to sizzle. I can feel a little bit of like, I want to move my body, I want to breathe more deeply, you know. Then we get 4 more blankets off. It's like, oh my gosh, now I can feel my mojo coming back. And then when we finally get that final heavy wet blanket off, whatever it is, could be a low adrenal reserve. It could be, you know, a financial stress or a family stress. It could be anything. We get that final blanket off and they're like, oh, all this energy returns to the woman. Women give away their energy so quickly and so readily and so unconsciously and also consciously. And it for a woman to reclaim her energy that's what empowerment is. And that is where drive and desire and libido return to life. And it is very much physiologically very much tied into your adrenal glands. So, you know, we hear this all the time. Oh, I have adrenal burnout, you know, and we're just running on cortisol, leaking cortisol every time we're 5 minutes late to an interview, right, Kaitlin? Did you have a little bit of that today?
As soon as you said that, I was like, I don't know what TikTok overheard me having a conversation about. I'm just fully convinced that I'm head to toe cortisol right now.
Yeah,
I don't know how to get it out of there.
You know how? Orgasm. So even if it's just to have a
Doctor's
quickie-
orders.
Yes, orgasm a day keeps the cortisol away. So even if you're just rubbing one out with your vibrator, I don't care. However you got to do it, however you got to have it, that is going to flood your bloodstream with oxytocin. That's the love hormone, the connective hormone, the like open, receptive vessel hormone, and it's going to push all that cortisol out. So ideally, a woman could, have quickie her way to having longer, more languid lovemaking sessions with herself, where she actually lights some candles, sets a little intention, makes a prayer of it, makes a ritual of it, puts on some good music and busts out some coconut oil and starts to move and breathe. We prescribe these rituals to women constantly. And a lot of times women, I'll be like, how did it go? Did you do it? And they're like, no, I didn't do it. It's like they just don't know how to get started because there's this expectation that it has to look a certain way, that they have to have some amazing orgasm from it, that they have to have some incredible experience. And the reality is all you really need to do is lay there and breathe deeply and feel places in your body that are stuck and go into them and unwind that stuckness so that you can bring the energy that you've been giving out back to yourself.
Yeah, I think one of the best places, especially for moms, to like find the time for that is like either in the bathtub or the shower. Like when you have the 5 minutes of actual, you can close the door and you can just jump into the shower and you can feel the heat and the steam and you can breathe. And, phones are nearly waterproof now. So like in my shower, put it up high, but like, get a steamy romance novel on audio. And like have yourself,
or use Dipsia or something.
Yeah, or use
Dipsia.
Something so that you have something to help engage your mind. Because I've really found that, you can have all the techniques and it can, and nothing is better than just finding a meditative breath and just placing your hands on your body and just asking, spirit or your higher self or whatever you believe in for help. Like, let me just come into my skin and have like a peaceful moment. And then there are other tools, there's using erotica. I mean, that has been a huge game changer for me. It's like, as I let someone else's imagination carry me away. And the next thing you know, like I'm horny and it's the most delightful feeling in the world. And I lose touch of that feeling so much by myself. I lose touch with having that be a resource because, when we're dating and stuff, like it's right there, right? We're hot and heavy for somebody and the chemistry's on and it's not an effort. But then once you're single for a long time or you're in a long-term relationship for a long time, it's hard to find, I feel like it. Most of the time we just don't feel like it. I'd rather watch TV or read a book or have a snack, and so like, how do we really make that switch? It starts by making a conscious choice and trusting that we deserve to have this respite in our life, to have this relief, and to realize that pleasure is really healthy. It increases our immune system. It increases our longevity. It increases our vitality. It helps keep stress off our bodies. And so we should really be encouraged to pursue it and to study it. Find out what's the trick that works for you. And then also stay fascinated. Because that trick that worked in your 20s ain't probably going to work in your 30s. And then it's going to change again in your 40s. And then it changes again in your 50s. And guess what that means? Awesomeness. It's exciting when shit changes. It just means we get to keep on growing and expanding. That's not something to get depressed about. That's something to stay fascinated about. And we really have to engage our love of learning so we see that our pleasure is something worth investing our time in. And pleasure comes in so many ways. And the big one, yes, is sexual, but there's other pleasures. Once you get in the habit of dipping into pleasure and allowing yourself, seeing that as something healthy to do, you'll start to see dips of pleasure everywhere, from taking a breath and watching a sunset to enjoying washing dishes with warm, hot, soapy water, to enjoying folding clothes, to enjoying baby giggles, to enjoying puppy snuggles, to enjoying a walk down the street. And like, you'll start to see that pleasure is everywhere. And then that becomes like a rolling snowball that changes how your day-to-day life feels, and it changes how you feel about purpose and meaning and all these other wonderful things. But when we get depleted, man, everything looks gray. So we got to fight for ourselves.
Yeah, I
love
think
that.
there's this expectation that like sexuality and pleasure and arousal and desire and libido, it should just come. It should just come to me. You know, I should just be turned, like my partner should turn me on, or it should be up to somebody other than me to have that experience. And that's the exact opposite of what it is.
Yeah.
Do you have another question for him, Kaitlin?
Just adore you two so much. Yes. Specific to what you just touched on, you know, a little bit ago, talking about acceptance and just body positivity in general, how it can look different based on like your age. It wasn't until I was pregnant with my first daughter or my first child, right around 2.5 years ago, when I was looking at my big old belly and I finally realized, you know, I'm in my late 20s now. How much of my life have I spent hating my body?
Yeah.
And now I'm turning 30 in June. Gemini gang, what's up? And now that I'm 30, I've also just like had another renaissance of this, of like, I've already cranked through 30 years of my life in this meat bag. Like, how much longer am I going to dedicate energy to hating it, or like not just loving it and being thankful for what it's doing for me? And it sounds like you two are in such a completely different place with body positivity and self-love and self-acceptance. Was there a point in your, you know, journey of womanhood, especially growing up and going out into the world, where you noticed this like switch start to take place, or have you always felt this way about yourselves and your bodies?
We have both hated our bodies plenty, Kaitlin. We have both been down that rabbit hole big time for a long time. We both had eating disorders as I was a teenager when I had that going on. And I never really had like body dysmorphia, but I also, I would say I just had like a self-loathing of just self in general. And then like, what is it to even be in a body, you know? And I actually always had a real perfect, you know, figure and sort of Barbie kind of look. So I had always what the society deems as ideally beautiful. And still, you know, I hated my body and wanted to not be in it for a long time. So it took years. It took getting out on my own and like starting to, you know, discover nutrition and like eating well and health. And once I started getting into healing and health and all of that, I started to be like, wow, it's not just for looks. It wasn't even that for me anymore. It was more about like for my energy and my capacity, my brain capacity, and my interest in things that I wanted to learn about and study. So I needed like my brain power back, you know, and that's what gave me that sense of like, okay, let's nourish this vessel. Let's take care of this vehicle that we're moving through life in. And Leah and I are both, you know, knocking on the door of perimenopause. We're looking that in the eye at this point. And that's when bodies start to change, you know, and things start to shift. And when that cycle ends, that estrogen, progesterone, testosterone levels go down, things really do start to change in a woman's body. And so, you know, that's why nutrition, herbs, even bioidenticals can be so beneficial for women as they age, because we're not aging to like, you know, 75 and dying at that point. People are living well into their 90s these days. And so not only do, you know, bioidenticals support you in your physicality and the way that you look and your confidence and all of that, but also bone density. They prevent breast cancer, prevent Alzheimer's and heart disease, keep you sleeping well through the night. I mean, all kinds of things. So I am somebody who's like on the spectrum of holistic versus reductionistic medicine. I've always been extremely holistic, like no bioidenticals, all food, all herbs, all that way, all the time. And I think if you have a strong foundation of that, then you don't need as much bioidenticals. But at this point, I'm like, I've opened up my perspective, and I've studied and I've looked into it more. And I do really see the benefit of moving in that direction. So there's so many opportunities, I think, as we go through womanhood to hate our bodies, because our bodies do this all our lives long. We go through so many different seasons as women during our whole lives. And if we look at it from a monthly perspective, we go through 4 seasons every single month. And that's like the majority of what I teach women, is how to cycle through winter, spring, summer, fall, every single month. What does that mean to your body, to your endocrine system, to your diet? What does that mean to your emotional state? What does that mean to your spiritual state? And so there's a whole system there.
And your professional output.
Yes,
ties
exactly.
into all that.
Yes, like I'm in my spring week right now, so I've got a lot more energy to put into everything, versus last week I was in my winter phase of my monthly cycle.
And I'm in fall. I'm headed into winter. Thank
That's
God
right.
it's in spring right now.
Yeah, we're like opposite each other. If we were living together, we'd be on the same cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting for me, this has been such a huge life focus for me, Kaitlin. I've been through, feel like, so many dark night of the souls when it comes to self-love and body positivity. And I've put myself through hell and back trying to solve this age-old problem. And I've had, and so many dysfunctions as a result of it. And have had some massive breakthroughs during different chapters of my life. Made drastic decisions that have gotten me to that breakthrough. And I think the tenacity of not giving up on myself is 1000% like my saving grace is I refuse to not fight for me. And so, and sometimes that means actually putting my dukes down and stopping the fight, and surrendering. And yes, it does get better. Like grace does descend. And for me, it's been a lot of similar to a little bit what Willow said. It's making the mission no longer vanity and making it something more powerful, because vanity feels like that's been the loop that has kept me stuck, because I can never be beautiful enough, desirable enough, like myself enough. And so for me, it had to be about mental wellness, of like really wanting the strongest life I could have. And so that meant living in my life a different way. And that meant like treating exercise a different way, not exercising because I want to have a particular body, but exercising because I want to have a particular brain. And when I made that switch, everything fell into line, and like flow started to happen and my brain started to shift. And so the conversations I had in my head, again, the brain had to change. So the way I would look into the mirror and the voice that would arise when looking into the mirror, I had to come up with a volume control system that could turn down the volume on the mean voice and turn up the volume on the beautiful voice, and learn how to play with those dials so that I liked who I saw in the mirror. And then when I'm in the bathtub doing my self-love practice and touching my curves and going, I like the way these curves feel. I may not always like the way the curves look, but damn, these curves feel good when I touch them. And so it's like really working with the power of the mind and talking back to the mind in a more powerful, more productive way. And I feel like as a result, amazing things have happened. Amazing people have come in. Amazing sex has validated the better choices that I've made with how I'm using this big, beautiful, juicy brain of mine, because it's the biggest sex organ, and it can see things that a more smaller ego cannot see. And so there's a way of just kind of playing with our evolution and going, I am not going to live this life feeling like shit about myself. It's just not worth it. I mean, and it's a lie. And so I think the other thing that really helped see me through is to start looking at myself through the eyes of people who really love me. What's the life they would have for me? What are the things they would want me to believe about myself? And let me see myself through their eyes. And then I'm like fucking gorgeous. It's like, shut the door. Like, what a babe, man. Like, I want to strip you down and do nasty things to you. Like, and then it's like, how can I deny what they see? You know, what a travesty. So it does get better. And now I'm coming up against my next great challenge, which is getting older and seeing how many of my older friends feel invisible. And it's like, okay, here, now just wait until I walk into the room and no one pays attention to me.
Mm-hmm.
I still get attention now, but there's going to come a time when no one notices you. And that is another painful initiation that I watch so many of my older sisters, go through life with. And so there's a place of power and humbleness and strength that one has to walk themselves through with that. And so it's like kind of never ending. It's an interesting thing to be the sex that was sort of built to be beautiful and the challenges that come with trying to keep that beauty. And
men have no idea what we go through.
Yeah. Yes.
Even if they have an
actually,
idea, they don't have an idea.
Right.
That's why I started nodding, because I was like, yeah, I don't.
Matt's
I got
like,
nothing.
no, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
know.
So I think what I would like to leave a message for you and for any women who are struggling with this is just to call on grace and to surround yourself with good role models.
Yeah.
And
Get yourself
don't
surrounded by
believe
sisters.
The critical voice in your head. It's not the one that's got the truth for you.
Yeah.
Leah, I'm just picturing one of those giant stereo systems from the 90s that I grew up with, sitting in my living room with a giant
Like a boom box.
Yeah,
Dials.
like a boombox. I
Dials.
had like huge like 4 or 5 foot speakers and like a chunk in the middle that had these huge
Totally.
volume dials on it. And that's just what I'm picturing. I'm in a new form of therapy that we just talked about very recently on a recorded episode that hasn't been released yet. And it's personifying all these different parts of my, identifying my trauma parts, identifying my
Parts
protectors,
work. Yeah.
my firefighters.
IFS. Woo!
Yes, it's IFS.
Good for you.
Yes,
Good
ma'am.
for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now,
Turning
as
the
I'm
channel and then
turning the channel,
volume. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
changing the volume, I think the giant 90s stereo is now going to have to be a welcome addition to this conference room where all these different parts of me sit around the table.
It's the new logo, baby.
I love that. I love that.
That's great. That's great.
So I got this kind of also written in, but it was more about like, how do I talk to my partner about hard things? And because that was like a vague topic, I was like, what can I zero in on? And one of the things that gets talked about more frequently, but not enough, is like the orgasm gap. But what gets talked about even less is the time it takes for women to be like completely aroused. And it seems like they jump into, like the fast lane because their partner is like, oh, it's on my schedule, not on the schedule that they need. And I know, like, for me, one of the things, and since like listening to podcasts like yours and like taking that into consideration, is like I realize now that it's an all day thing. So it's like if I send a text message and say, something nice and an affirmation to my wife, I know that already has started the ball rolling. And then throughout the day, being a good partner and being, attentive to like the things that make her feel good, while also being spicy, are things that like make it that much more like ready to go when it's time to go. And I'm curious as to, what advice you would give to people, to be more in their mental and full body arousal, but also ways that they can communicate that to their partner so that they have the tools not only to find their arousal, but also the tools to help their partner in, steering them in the right direction.
Yeah, as Leah mentioned, the brain is the most important sexual organ in the body. So when you're sending little sexting, little naughty things, little sweet things,
Invisible
little
ink on iPhones is the best thing ever.
yeah, there we
Yeah.
go. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Yeah, even just an emoji, I would have sometimes couples be like, "Okay, what does this emoji mean?" Emoji code. Like have an
Yeah.
emoji code with your partner. And so then they would know, they'd know like, okay, yeah, I'm feeling frisky. I'm going to be home in like a couple hours and I'm feeling frisky. And you got to get the kids organized and all kinds of things have to happen in order for that frisky to have room to play. And so I think that, those kinds of communications are so important. And then I think also what's really, really valuable for couples is to have regular intimacy dates. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't still have spontaneous sexual encounters because those are important too. But when you have like intimacy dates where you have more time and you have more, the woman can actually you can spend 20 minutes like just in foreplay mode and just, being in each other's essence more, then that informs those other experiences of, just quickies and sexting and that kind of stuff. It gives you more to play with. So it becomes an upward spiral when you have these intimacy dates on the calendar. I always recommend people do it on the full moon and the new moon, and that one person get to receive on the full moon and one person get to receive on the new moon, and actually take sexual intercourse off the table for that experience so that you're exploring like, okay, we're not allowed to have sexual intercourse. Like make it a little bit of a game. Like remember when we were in junior high and it was like, oh my God, you're humping, you're kissing, you're making out and everything's good and juicy, but like you're too young and you can't have sex with, you don't want to have sex with your partner because you might get pregnant or whatever the thing is that was like a thing that was stopping you. It's kind of fun to like take that off the table and not make it a thing. Because the other thing for women is like most of the nerve endings are on the vulva. They're on the outside of, once the man penetrates in or a woman penetrates in, a lot of the sensation can just go away, especially if they have trauma or numbness or stuck energy inside of their vaginal canal and the vaginal bowl. Then can be a lot of like, pain and discomfort. So getting things really warmed up and juiced up on a consistent basis, at least a couple of times a month is going to be so much more powerful for the ongoing upward spiral of that sexual union.
The other thing is when you're more consistently sexual, your sexual hormones are more consistent. So the more you do it, the more you're going to feel like doing it.
Yeah.
Now, my husband and I, being a sex expert, we go through lulls where we're not as sexually active as we both want to be, mainly because we get in a rut because, we don't feel like it. We want to, but it's like there's a disconnect between the body and the brain somehow. And so then it's like we don't feel as successful because not all the parts are kind of coming together right. So, but we know when we are consistent, man, does the sexual arousal become so much more easy to tap into. So if you don't use it, you will lose it. So you really need to be consistent, because when you're consistent, you'll want to feel it. The urge becomes easier and it doesn't feel like work as much. So remember, to keep your testosterone levels high, you got to engage your sexuality. The other thing that's helpful to know that I think is really a refreshing take is use the obstacles to your benefit. There's actually inside of the obstacles to sex is a lot of eros, is a lot of sexual energy that we can capitalize on. For instance, yearning, longing. To play with yearning for your beloved all day long while you're both at work, yearning to touch and hug and kiss and lick. It's like you have to put yourself into the frame of mind using your imagination. When they're gone, to miss them, to yearn for them. Longing is a huge aphrodisiac. Another aphrodisiac is power dynamics, right? When allowing someone else to have control of the situation, or being the one who's all in control of the situation. That's another aphrodisiac. Something else that's very much an aphrodisiac is the forbidden, being naughty. When Willow was giving that example of like, have some date nights each week where sex is off the table. You can do
Mhm.
anything but penetration. That forbidden thing, you have a rule, you're not allowed to do it. That is going to drive up your sexual energy like crazy. You're going to have a part of you that wants to break the rules so damn bad. And guess what? You're an adult and you can. But play the game for a while. Take things off the table. Give yourself 3 seconds in the broom closet while the kids are making craziness in the dining room. They'll be all right. Just hide the knives. There are things that you can do to capitalize on urge. And they don't have to be an hour-long tantra session. They can literally be 3 seconds of groping each other behind the refrigerator door. Get creative to juice each other up. And it is a mindset. You have to think about it. You need to actually, with intention, bring your mind back to your sensuality. Bring your attention to the 5 senses. Fantasize about the nasty things you want to do to your lover. Fantasize about the nasty things you want someone to do to you, and then go masturbate later with it. Use whatever works to engage your system, to feel that flush of blood go to all those yummy parts, and have fun getting off on it. Like, you got to really be intentional. Don't
That's one
just
of those
leave it to
things.
chance.
Yeah, I love what you said just there, because like one of my favorite things is like it always reminds me of that episode of Friends where Ross was like trying to learn how to dirty talk, and then he was like, "Did you finally dirty talk?" He's like, "Yeah," but by the time we were done, we were kind of tired, so we just kind of went to bed. And it's like those are my favorite times where like all day we've been texting each other, we've been sexting each other, and we finally get home, and it's those moments of like the kids are running around doing whatever, so we're in the kitchen, I'm cooking, and she rubs up behind me or I rub up behind her or whatever, the like 2 seconds we have before one of the kids like darts in the kitchen, and then we end up like going to bed, and now we're tired because the day exhausted us, and then it's like, man, all I know is that was like that fell flat, but I'm not mad. I'm just like, I want you that much more today because like we didn't get to. And I feel like you have to like yearn for your partner in a way that, like you said, the obstacles. So like you're at work all day and I don't get to see you. That doesn't mean that like I can't fantasize about you, or I can't remind you of that thing that we did, 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago, 2 years ago. That was amazing. And you're like, ooh, I forgot about that. And now you're thinking about that all day. Nothing is more powerful to getting home than those memories, or those like, man, I've been thinking about you all day. I am so excited to just be in your embrace, to just be in your your presence, because I see this light around you and I love it. So
Yeah.
I love that advice.
And here's a little trick for men. Women have, by the way, on my Facebook, I just put out a post if anyone wants to sign the petition. They are cutting off women's clitorises. It's really terrible. It's happening all over Africa. But anyway, the clitoris is like this incredible part of a woman's anatomy that is only for pleasure, right? So if men are making more effort to be aware of the sensitivity of that part of their partner's body, you can come up behind her and just give it just a little brush, just a quick little tickle. Just, I'm on my way to go stir fry over there. I'm just going to do a quick little tickle of the clit.
Yeah.
Why not? And
Yeah.
she's going to be like, whoa, that was exciting. It's a little bit more direct and a little bit more,
don't be heavy-handed. It's a tickle.
Don't be heavy-handed. It's a light thing. Yeah. But it's like, usually men are like grabbing the ass or grabbing the tits. And it's like that, those can be, you want to go light-handed on those. But I think just because there's so much like, these are, for women, their breasts are always for others, and so for them to actually reclaim their breasts as their own, for their own pleasure and for their own enjoyment, is a big empowerment move as well. But it's just so unusual for a man to spend, like, to just be more conscious of the clitoris. And then I also want to say, like, for new moms, if you're a new mom, if you're 1 year postpartum, all of your oxytocin is going to your baby, and it should be going to your baby. So if you're not feeling sexually engaged or excited or alive at that juncture of your life, then that's normal. I just want to normalize that for everyone. And even, 2 years, if you're still breastfeeding, if your body is still going out to your child, there's going to be not as much energy for you. You could think about that as one of those blankets it's with you until it's not with you. So, take a lot of ashwagandha and make
Cut
sure
yourself
that
some slack.
cut yourself some slack.
And partner cut herself some slack.
Exactly.
And I think also, like you mentioned, communication, Matt, and this is where, as couples, we really want to start increasing our conscious communication with each other to endeavor to be our partner's safe space, that their desire is safe with you. And that doesn't mean that it's your job to fulfill your partner's desire. I have tons of desires that I don't ever want to actually see happen in real life. They belong in my head. Like, they're too dangerous to be out in the real world. But it is something that builds so much intimacy when I can tell the person who I love the most these secret desires, that I get to share that with someone who won't judge me, who won't shame me, who won't think I'm weird, and who doesn't feel obligated to create it for me, but just witnesses me and doesn't mind being a part of these secret places of the world that is called the inner landscape of Leah, that turns her on. To be able to trust someone enough and to trust myself enough to be that vulnerable, to be that real, to be that naked, that I would let you see into these other parts of my mind, that is closeness. And so for us to be able to not be threatened by the fantasies that our partners may have, they're like a movie that opens them into their body. That's not something to be afraid of. That's something to celebrate. And when you are trusted with that information, oh my God, you are so loved. You become so the beloved in that moment because you're taking care of a part of their like sacred, quiet, secretive realms inside of them. So it's really important that we learn how not to judge our partner and how to be that kind of safe space so that we can bring all of ourselves to the table and we know that we'll be loved and adored. And it's so important that we do not let someone else's fantasy attack our self-esteem or attack our worth because it doesn't quite align with what turns us on. It's okay. We don't have to have all the same desires, but can we celebrate that our partner is filled with desire? And then that just adds more creativity to our potential. It opens up a lot of room for us to play.
That's one of the things that me and my wife have been focused on now more than we have. Like, we've been together for 17 years. So like, it's been forever. So like, we were kids when we first met. So like, we're making space for those moments and trying to figure out like, okay, this is a fantasy of yours, or this is a thing that you're attracted to. And like, why did I recoil to that, and dissecting that thing, because it's not for me, it's for you. And my recoil means that I have to address something for me to be able to accept this thing about you, not the other way around. Like, I don't have to push yours down because it makes me feel a way. And that's such a like weightlifting thing where you're just like, I love that you feel confident enough to tell me this thing that like usually stays in like the darkest corner of your mind, and you're afraid to like go there because it's like nobody wants. And to be able to do that and to be able to have those conversations, I think is so important. And I would encourage more couples to like start having, like, even if it's like, oh, like if we took a shower together, and it's something small to start, like getting that like that conversation going and being like, oh, they actually responded well to that conversation. Maybe we can have something else, or maybe we can, I love that. And I'm glad that people like you two are out there, spreading that message of like, just talk to your partner, like open up and do it in a safe way, do it in a caring way, and continue to, I guess, talk about it so it becomes front of mind as opposed to like those dark corners.
Yeah. And then what you get good at is you get good at like seeing what's underneath the fantasy, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say I have a fantasy and I want to be tied to a dining room table. I want to be blindfolded. I want 8 men to come into the room and do wonderful things to me. I don't want them to be mean. I want them to do it all for my pleasure. And they can't talk because I don't want to know who they are. Imagine I have that fantasy. No, what's really the symbol of that fantasy? It's wanting to be ravished.
Mm-hmm.
It's wanting to be taken. It's wanting to not be at choice and not have to make any decisions.
To be fully desired.
I actually want 8 strange men to come and do things to me while I am tied up on a dining room table. But yet that opens the door to my turn on. And what could my husband do with that is go, oh, think of all the things that symbolize being ravished. From that fantasy, we get symbols. And when you start getting comfortable with talking about these things, you start to realize that all these are symbols. And then that's where the creativity can come from. Now that takes some skill and it takes some practice and it might take a therapist, but it
definitely takes some erotica.
Yes, and in this case, I did read that in a book, and that's where I got that idea. And so it's like not being afraid of this. God, we're so afraid sometimes. Mm-hmm. So we have to be really sensitive.
We're afraid of the unknown, and a lot of couples will come to us and they won't have shared any sexual fantasies. They won't even allow themselves to have sexual fantasies because they know that if they share that with their partner's going to judge them. Their partner's going to respond in a way that they don't want to deal with. And so there's sort of this like block within the relationship for intimacy to go deeper. Yeah. So you might have to pull back a little bit, zoom back, and like start with some fantasies that aren't about sexuality at all. Like I have a fantasy that we go travel together. I have a fantasy that we do this, just to start sharing any fantasies that you have. And also to say to them, like, I am not expecting you to fulfill this fantasy, but here's what it looks like. I just want to share it with you. It's just so, and then what Leah was saying, and here's what's underneath it for me is to have this like sense of adventure, or this feeling of like, I'm not, stuck in a 9-to-5, or I'm not stuck in a, whatever kind of role that you feel stuck in. And so there's a lot of value to communicating outside of the sexuality bedroom in the same way that you would communicate around your sexuality, because it gives you a sense of practice, and it gives you a sense of like, okay, I'm starting to open up my partner's mind, and I'm starting to have a different experience of them rather than going straight into judgment. Now they're like, they're with me on this fantasy, and they can even add to the fantasy. Yeah. Oh, wouldn't it be great if we did this? And then you're dreaming together. Right. I think that's one of the things that falls so heavy on relationships is partners stop dreaming together. You get so stuck in the grind and the gotta get everything done and the bills paid and the kids to bed and all the pieces that happen within long-term relationships. They can get very stale because partners stop dreaming together. And sometimes when you are dreaming together, it's like, oh, but you could get stuck in that thing of, oh, but we'll never have enough money to do that, or we'll never have what we need, the time or the space or whatever it is to do that. And that also can feel like a heavy weight. So just letting dreaming be its own thing, letting imagining be its own thing, letting fantasizing just be, juice, food for fodder, like just a thing that gets you, opens a door, opens a new pathway for your imagination, for your heart to expand. Because when we're feeling certain emotions and we're feeling expanded and we're feeling excited and we're feeling love, guess what? The universe brings more of that in. And we're feeling heavy and we're feeling stressed and we're feeling overwhelmed. Guess what? That's what we get more of. So you just have to really watch where your nervous system is at, where your mind is at, where your heart is at, no matter what life circumstances you find yourself in.
I have to say that for decades, my mind wasn't wired for fantasizing. Like I didn't have, like someone say, hey, what's your fantasy? I'd be like, I don't fucking know. Like try something. I'll tell you if I like it. Like, I don't know how to access fantasies. My brain doesn't think like that. I don't get turned on by pictures and ideas of things being done to me. I had no access to that. And the reason why I bring that up is because it kind of comes back to the boss babes. Like there came a point where I had to pursue my own, as Willow would call it, sexual sovereignty. I needed to pursue and understand what does turn me on. What gets me wet? What lights me up? What makes me want to have sex? What causes me to want to press on the accelerator? What causes me to want to press on the brakes? If you're not asking yourself those questions, then you end up being a victim to fate in your life. And so we have to also, as women in particular, because we've normalized male sexual energy, we've normalized male sexual fantasies and pursuits. I mean, even as little boys and they get their little erections, we've really normalized that for boys to a large degree, but we haven't for girls. Kind of goes back to purity culture. We're supposed to not want to have it so that we remain this pristine thing. And so that has caused women to not know what it is that they turns them on, or doesn't give them a clear access to their desire or to their turn on. It's like we're expected to be ignorant instead of being encouraged to find out, to go on a journey. When you can become responsible for your own pleasure and your own orgasms, sex becomes a blast. It is no longer a chore, and it's no longer someone else's job. We start to take failure and success out of the equation again. So I really want to encourage all the boss babes out there that you really want to go on a journey of becoming a sexually sovereign woman, to discover for yourself what lights you up, and then hand that map to every lover you encounter. And let's also support them in being successful, because when they have your map, man, saying yes to sex is just so damn easy. It's really not this chore anymore.
I legitimately, like I said, that's been like the kind of the topic of like me and my wife and what we're trying to do. So for the last year, that exact message is what I've been trying to like help her, hear. And I'd hear an episode of, a show like yours or your show and be like, hey, listen to this part, and like give her a timestamp, because it's like, I don't want you to hear it from me saying it like I'm just your, your partner trying to like do this thing. I want you to hear it from other people, because I can see you having these struggles, and it's not a bad thing that you're having these struggles. You just haven't been given the tools to to do that thing. And there's tons of people that are in the exact same position as you, and there's these people that are saying, hey, you can do this, try these things, try those things. And I think that, again, I'm glad you shouted it out the way that you did, because so much, people, all genders need to get to that point, but women specifically need to, hear themselves. And I think there's so much noise about what you should be and what you shouldn't be and what you should do and what's okay and what isn't okay, and that you have to do this, and if the guy wants this, then like all of that is literally noise after you. So you have to figure out that thing that you want. Like, one of my favorite things is like my wife will say, that's one of those things that like makes my ovaries like explode like fireworks. And that's how I know like we hit a good thing. Like that thing was super exciting, and it's a way that she's learned, like she's taught herself to like verbalize like that's exciting in a way that's more than just like, oh well, that's a turn on, like it. And as those things grow, as those things become more like verbalized, she can then tell me, oh, I like this part, or oh, I like that part. And it takes obviously like her to realize that thing, but it also takes a patient partner. So partners out there, be patient. And as frustrating as it might be occasionally to be like, why can't you have to remember like every day is 1% more. And if you stay the course and patient and loving and kind and supportive, then like you'll both get there. But also they won't recoil, because they're not like, oh, now I feel bad because I'm not doing. And
yes,
I like I said, I love the way you put that, because it's so true. I'm glad you said it.
thank you. Yeah.
Kaitlin, did you get some this or that's? Because we're definitely past our hour, and I just realized that, because I could talk to you two forever.
Oh, seriously. I wasn't even going to bring it to your attention. I just wish that we could hang out for like 12 hours. Yes, I have 3 quick this or that's. Feel free to answer together, separate, whatever you want to do. First one, vanilla or chocolate?
Chocolate.
I love that. Okay. Second one, night in or a night out with your partner?
In.
Oh. In and out, in and out, in and out.
Faster, harder, softer, slower. In and out, in and out, in and out.
Not one
my
without the
gosh.
other. I don't know.
Both.
I love
And
it. All right. A quick callback to part of the conversation that we heard earlier tonight. Either you can never talk about sex ever again, or you can never talk about finances ever again.
never talk about finances.
Finances, for sure.
Yeah, how could we not talk about sex?
That's what I said too,
That
but
just wouldn't work.
Yeah.
originally
be dead.
I didn't expect us to go this long, but I had some pulled up that are we and my wife use the Paired app, which is like communication for couples, and they ask spicy questions sometimes they just do,
cool.
you know,
Fun.
so like we've been like using it since it's 153 days because I just got my badge for how
Cool.
often
Nice.
we've used it, but
Awesome.
they posted this thing to Instagram, and there's some spicy or this or that, so if you will, do you want to answer some spicy this or that?
Yes,
Give us a
always.
spicy.
All right. Would you rather never have an orgasm again or have an orgasm every hour on the hour?
Every hour on the
Every
hour.
hour.
Why would that?
Fuck
That's
yeah.
not a good
Yeah,
question.
right. That's
Yeah.
that's why it's number one. I
Yeah.
assume that they wanted to start off with like an easy one.
An easy
Yeah.
one.
And then the next one is, would you rather have sex in the bathroom or in the kitchen?
Kitchen.
Your bathroom.
Well, there you
I've had
go.
some
I
hot
didn't.
sex in the bathroom. Comes instantaneously to my mind.
Fair enough.
I like the kitchen countertop.
Yeah.
Would you rather have your hair pulled or have your back scratched?
Hair pulled.
Hair pulled.
Yeah, I like the back scratching thing. Like, it's I don't know.
It can be kind of relaxing, the back scratch. I
Yeah.
guess it depends on the moment and how
Yeah.
it's done.
Depends
though.
on
Yeah.
which peak of arousal and how hard that scratches.
That's right.
True
Yeah.
statement.
But there's something
Um,
about someone pulling your hair that's like,
Oh, the hair
ugh,
pull.
it's like-
Gotta love it.
I don't usually
very
got that,
primal.
so.
Yeah.
But thank you again for being here. Thank you for being boss babes in general and putting good messages out there, and just being your overall awesome selves. We can't thank you enough.
It's our pleasure to sit with you both, and cheers to more down the
Yes.
line.
Love
Yeah.
your show, and thanks so much for having us back.
The bell is about to ring. If you want to drop us a voice message or simply ask a question, you can do that by clicking the link in the show notes below. Be sure to leave us a 5-star review. It helps more people find us. Theme music by Kinsey. More music available on Spotify. Remember, every day is a class. Go learn something.